Well, we're 3/4 of the way through the regular season. Ohio State, according to plan, right? They're 9-0, and they've largely looked the part, despite the fact that maybe there are some folks out there that would tell you otherwise. Buckeyes are number one in the country after the first CFP ranking. They went on the road this weekend and won by 19 on the road in the Big Ten. So did they back it up? I would argue they did. Did they look like a team that's definitely going to win the national championship? I don't know if I'd say that about anybody in the country. But we are getting to the point in the season now where all the games are that much more meaningful. We're going to tell you exactly why we think Ohio State is ranked where they should be, plus what kind of impact a healthy TreVeyon Henderson truly can have on the Buckeyes down the stretch. Buckeye Breakdown coming up next. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. I'm Brendan Gulick, along with Anthony Moeglin. Glad to have you here on this Monday evening, November the 6th, still tonight. I had to think, was it the 7th or the 6th? Today's Monday, November 6th, and we are getting ready for a big week at home because this is the kind of game that the Buckeyes need to really look good in. Michigan State is coming to town. We are going to certainly spend some time this week discussing Ohio State and Michigan State. But this is a little bit more of a big picture night and still a bit of reflection back on the win over the weekend against Rutgers. Anthony, let's maybe kind of start with your biggest takeaway now that 48 hours have passed on what you learned here from this Ohio State win.
Yeah, no question. I think that it, as this win kind of marinated a little bit, it just felt more and more like your typical Ohio State win from this year. It's not something that we've been accustomed to the past couple of years, but the way that they performed, the way that they just grinded it out and then pulled away at the end, it's been the typical, like, it's almost like cookie cutter when they're how they've been playing so far this year, where, you know, it's a little bit closer early. They figure stuff out. By halftime, they come out and they look the part and they finish really strong. And it's felt much better as time has passed here. So definitely an exciting win when you could win by 19 on the road in the Big Ten. That's never something to just brush off. It was an impressive victory, and it's getting better kind of as the days go on here.
And I think what I've learned about the College Football Playoff Committee, you know, over the last few years, they're pretty good about, like, for the most part, living in this moment and not projecting forward, right, on who they think might be better based on what could happen. Like, that's fan conjecture. That certainly happens in the AP poll and maybe even in the coaches poll, where the CFP committee is a little bit more, hey, we start over every week. We look at the resumes that every team has through that previous week, and we'll slot them where we think they rank based on what they've accomplished. I think it's impossible for a committee of humans to take out any human element at all, right? But it seems like they try to take out that as much as possible, and then maybe the eye test matters when they're really splitting hairs on some things. So I'm not surprised that Ohio State's the number one ranked team in the country because they've got two huge wins. They clearly have some high-end talent. And where everybody in the country this year has looked a little bit vulnerable. I mean, even Georgia and Michigan have had some moments this year where you're like, that doesn't seem like a team that's just going to steamroll everybody, where the rest of the country's playing for second place. Right now, Ohio State seems to have the best resume of the group. I mean, last week, Michigan's best win going into last weekend's games, Michigan's best win was Rutgers. So everybody that wanted to knock Ohio State for, only beating Rutgers by 19, I mean, that was Michigan's top win, right? So I thought Ohio State was ranked where they should, and I frankly kind of expect that to stay this week.
Yeah, no question. It almost feels like when they're ranking those teams for the college football playoff rankings that they just take the names away and just like, hey, here's the resume, and here it is. And they remove Ohio State, they remove Georgia, they remove Michigan, and then they slot them. And then as the names pop back in, that's kind of where they are, which is what you appreciate, because it takes away, like you said, it takes away all the fandom, it takes away the logos and everything like that. So you definitely appreciate that. However, I do love the fact that they do it. I don't even know what week it was. Was it week 9, week 8 or 9 or whatever it is? You got you thinking too.
I think technically it's week
10. It would have been week
right?
10
because you have week 0 games.
That's true.
I think.
Hey, they never said we were the smartest, right? You and I. But no, I love how they do it when they do it, because there's still room for stuff to shake out, and it's really cool. Just the way that things go. You have a bunch of action this week that was meaningful, and you talk even about Georgia. That's been the team the past couple of years, and even last week against Missouri. They're only up a handful of points at halftime, and it's a game. They end up pulling away a little bit towards the end. Obviously Michigan rolled Purdue, but Michigan's gonna look that way until they play Ohio State. They got Penn State this week, so that's going to be a really good one. But it's just the thing we've been saying throughout the year is that this landscape has been the most even that it's been in a long time, and it's really exciting because it's going to make for a really eventful last couple of weeks to the regular season.
So, I think Ohio State's resume continues to look strong. And I think they've done a pretty good job, and you could kind of see in the facility this past week where typically on the video board it says, beat and then the logo of whoever they're playing. This week it just had the block O up there as if to say, you know what? Forget about everything else. Just focus on us. That's the message that, seems to be floating through the Woody. And there's a whole lot of distraction right now. It's pretty easy to get caught up in other stuff. And so I guess we're going to find out how good Ohio State is at controlling their emotions and staying focused on the things they need to focus on. And this week that's Michigan State. And again, we're going to get into Michigan State, as the week progresses. But I think if you evaluate sort of how Ohio State has gotten to this point, my biggest takeaway is that they're finding ways to win games different than they did last year. And it's not like that's just some sudden revelation. They are clearly a team with, in my opinion, good quarterback play. Where the last 4 years they were led by first-round NFL draft picks. And by the way, C.J. Stroud right now isn't just in the running for the NFL Rookie of the Year. He's legitimately put himself in potentially MVP talks. He has played unbelievable for the Houston Texans so far. Still a lot of time there left. But my point is that guy was playing at Ohio State, less than 12 months ago. And to judge this Ohio State team based on a team last year that had that guy playing quarterback, it's probably not fair for anybody to do that. So their ability to win games different ways is my biggest takeaway and why I continue to be optimistic about them.
And the consistency of them doing that has been my favorite part about it, is because we've been waiting all year long for, are they going to snap into old Ohio State form where, you think back to Justin Fields and you think back to even Dwayne Haskins and then CJ last year. It's like, are they going to ever snap back into that? They haven't, but they've just morphed into this new team where, hey, we're going to grind you out, and it may look a little bit clunky in the first half, or we may be in some tight games, but you're going to feel us in the fourth quarter, and you're going to have to answer to elite talent all over the field, whether it be at the wide receiver position with Marvin Harrison, or you're handing it off to TreVeyon Henderson, who potentially is playing better football than anybody in the entire country right now. So it's like, hey, we're going to keep these games maybe a little bit closer, and they may feel different than they have in the past, but you're still going to feel us in the fourth quarter, and you're going to find out, hey, this Ohio State team is built on toughness. That goes back to, that's a callback to week 3 in Notre Dame, but they truly are and mentally strong, physically strong, and a really tough team to beat so far this season.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Notre Dame thing, because I wanted to transition just for a moment around, the general landscape in college football. And you get to this point in the year and there's a lot of data points, even for just fans, to evaluate how they think teams stack up. And you sort of hope that the good wins that are on your resume look good all year long because those teams continue to play well and beat everybody else. And so far, Penn State has upheld their end of the bargain. The Notre Dame win to me still looks like a good win. I don't know if I think of it as an elite win anymore. They've fallen 3 times. They lost to an Ohio State team that they played very well against, but ultimately couldn't figure it out. And so, okay, the loss the following week was the real head scratcher. And then they couldn't get it done on the road against a Clemson team that, I don't know, maybe they were playing inspired football thanks to Tyler and Spartanburg. I don't know what, got the Tigers rolling. But Notre Dame did not play well in Death Valley.
No, they did not. And like you said, it's really important for those wins to stay good. But I go back to that, and I don't think that they're going to have a problem with that, because I don't care if Notre Dame's ranked in the top 10 or if they're out of the top 25. Having to go to South Bend and win a game there is really, really challenging at any point in the season for any Notre Dame team. So you wish that win looked a lot better. They were horrible on Saturday in Clemson. I had that game on while I was cleaning the house. Had a riveting Saturday afternoon, but just watching it, they just looked sloppy. And you wonder, like, their season from the Ohio State game on has just gone downhill. You could say Ohio State maybe broke them a little bit, but whatever the case is, they haven't continued to win games.
Pretty mediocre.
What's that?
Hartman has looked kind of mediocre.
He's just not good. Like that's what you kind of find out is like why our guys in the NFL or in the college football for 6 years is because they're not good enough to play at the next level. The good ones go and the mediocre ones stay. He's been disappointing this last half of the year, but regardless of the Irish, you wish they would, continue to keep winning for Ohio State's sake. But I still think that win looks pretty good. Like you said, not elite, but still very good.
Yeah. All right. Before we go to TreVeyon Henderson, I saw something today that you get to this point in the year and you start to see bowl projections. And I wasn't going to bring this up, but it resonated with me deeply enough that I have to say it. This is going to sound so degrading, and I really don't mean it that way. The bowl projection for the Buckeyes assumed that Ohio State would lose to Michigan and would miss the college football playoff. And whereas losing to Michigan and missing the playoff a couple of years ago and winding up in the Rose Bowl against Utah, I know that it felt like a weird consolation prize, even though it ultimately gave us one of the great Rose Bowl games ever and the single greatest wide receiver performance ever in a bowl game from Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't quite feel in the same light what I saw today, and that is that the Buckeyes were projected by, I think it was Action Network, Brett McMurphy tweeted this out, that the Buckeyes were projected to play in the Orange Bowl against Louisville. And it was just a part of me that felt like, golly, would that feel like the air coming out of the balloon? Does Ohio State's resume in that instance at 11-1 keep them out of the playoffs despite a win over Penn State and Notre Dame? Because they would certainly have the best one-loss resume in the country, without question. Does that feel like, the right place? I don't know. But if Ohio State ends up in the Orange Bowl against Louisville, like, that stinks.
Yeah, that's not what you'll want.
No.
And it's curious, the conversation that I've been hearing, and, we can actually have this right now, is, with the respect that was given to Ohio State, giving them the number 1 seed, it kind of gives them that leeway. I didn't necessarily see it that way. I think that there's the room for error is so small at the top, but they're saying that, hey, they could be the one-loss team, and they certainly could, especially with USC falling a couple times. Like, there's not going to be an LSU falling to Alabama. The problem is, if there's a one-loss Ohio State team and a one-loss Alabama team, I guess it would have to be a one-loss Georgia team because Bama and Georgia would have to link up. Then you're kind of flipping a coin, and it's like, hey, what's it going to be? And, then it's just a pit. Like, I don't know what's going to, I don't know what would happen there. That'd be a tough decision to have to make.
Yeah. And I don't know Georgia's schedule off the top of my head, but if Georgia loses to Alabama, let's say, and they've got one loss, and Alabama, has a Georgia win on its resume, does that win, overtake Ohio State beating Notre Dame and Penn State? Like, who else would Alabama have to beat on the way there? Because I would argue their win over LSU, while good, LSU's lost 3 times now. So,
but then the question is, what does Georgia's resume look like? Because because they hadn't really, I can't think of their schedule off the top of my head, but I'm not sure if any. Does Ohio State's resume overtake Georgia's? Would be the question that I would ask. Is how does that shake?
So I'm looking at Georgia's schedule right now. So Georgia has beaten Tennessee, Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, UAB, an unranked Auburn team by a touchdown. They beat up Kentucky pretty good. Kentucky's top 20. They beat Vanderbilt unranked by 17. They beat Florida by 23, and probably their best win of the year was this past weekend over Missouri.
Missouri, yeah.
Beat them by 9. So, they've still got a couple big games coming with Ole Miss and with Tennessee the next couple weeks. I would think that if Georgia wins both of those games, theoretically, a win over Ole Miss and a win over Georgia and a win over Missouri, who right now people are high on, that could give them an edge.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably better for Ohio State fans in the event that the Buckeyes do have a loss. I would probably lean toward wanting Georgia to win the SEC title, hand Alabama a second loss, and then hope that Ohio State is viewed in a better light than, potentially an undefeated Pac-12 team, Washington or Florida State. Look, Washington's offense looks ridiculous, but their defense isn't great.
And I'll tell you what, they're going to have to face Oregon again, and it's the same conversation because then if a one-loss Oregon then beats Georgia, but then beats Washington, which of those 2 teams goes? It's gonna. This is the cool part about the 4-team. This won't be a conversation next year because they'll just all be in, and it'll be really cool. And it'll be playing a game at Ohio Stadium and Washington Stadium and Georgia. Like, that'll be really sweet. This will be a fun one this year. These final 4 teams. There's going to be a team that gets snubbed. Hopefully it's not ours, but there will be for sure.
Yeah. Last year it looked like the Buckeyes might be on the outside looking in, and they got a little lucky that 2 conference championship games went their way, and they kind of backdoored their way into the playoff and proved that they belonged, and they were, I thought a bad overturned targeting call and a missed field goal away from playing for the national championship against TCU. And, we don't have to go down that road. I think we know how that one would have ended.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk TreVeyon Henderson for a moment.
Yeah.
I don't want to delay that any further. I have thought a lot about and watched some tape over from these last couple of weeks. And I truly believe that if Trey is healthy, it feels like he's the missing piece to an offense that's been a little clunky, because yes, it would certainly help if Cade Stover is out there as well and fully healthy. But I think maybe we forgot or didn't appreciate enough how good this group is at full strength with Marvin, Emeka, TreVeyon, Cade, Julian, Carnell Tate. When they're all out there, TreVeyon in particular, to me, makes the biggest difference, because if you're so focused on either doubling Marvin Harrison or playing a defense that just basically takes him out of the game, kind of the way Notre Dame did, you're going to have other guys open, and TreVeyon can be that guy with the way they can scheme things up. He's so good.
He's so good. And my favorite part about him is, and just learning his style this year a little bit more in detail, is just his ability. And we talked about it on Saturday. I'm just really impressed by his multi-layered ability, where he can beat you to the edge with great speed, but he's not afraid of contact. Like, oftentimes you get those quick, speedy guys who kind of shy away from a little contact. but then sometimes you get the bruisers who can't really get to the edge. He's got that very rare talent to do both. And, his stats kind of back it up, right? 90 carries, 585 yards. He's the only back outside of Dallin Hayden who only has 11 carries that's averaging above 6 yards a carry. And we've talked about that often. Like, go back to some of the early weeks where you and I would discuss like, hey, we can't get the run game going, averaging 2 yards a carry or 3 yards a carry over a game. Like, it felt clunky. And then you get a fresh TreVeyon back who has fresh legs, looks healthy, looks good. And he's just running the heck out of the football. And he's such a difference maker, both in the pass game and in the run game.
So how much Michigan have you watched this year?
A couple games, like just a couple games and then some highlights.
Do you feel like TreVeyon's skill set at full strength is a matchup problem for them?
So it's tough because you can team defense a running back who's kind of going out like this. I think one of the things that, without making any jokes, I'll refrain. But like one of the things is that Michigan does play with a lot of toughness, regardless of all the other stuff. But they are a tough team, and they will try to just kind of muddy it up inside and just really punch you in the mouth. I think that what TreVeyon's strength is also Michigan's strength. And it's going to be like a strength on strength type of a thing. And something will have to give. That's going to be one where it's like comes down to and this is obviously easy to say and cliche, but it comes down to the offensive line. Sure. And the offensive line has been a little bit of the issue of the past couple of years. But like if they can get some movement and let TreVeyon get to the second and third levels, I think it'll be really, really challenging to kind of stop this guy, especially the way he's playing right now.
Well, I mean, I feel like when Ohio State's been at its best, it's because they've gotten their best skill position players in space where they can use, their speed. Ohio State's team speed, I almost feel like is underappreciated, right? You get caught up in the way Marvin can high point a ball or the way Cade Stover can, run you over. I think TreVeyon has shown in the last couple of weeks, especially because he's healthy, that like he is inviting contact. Yeah. Right? There's this impression around him that, TreVeyon's the faster, explosive back who can run away from people, but doesn't want to run somebody over. And Chip Trayanum and Mayan Williams are this, this combination of like, no, we're just gonna, we're gonna run between the tackles and bulldoze you. And I think there's probably a middle ground that's more accurate with all three of them. Like TreVeyon has that home run ability for sure, but I've seen him lower his shoulder into defenders more the last 2 weeks than I think I've ever seen. And when Chip Trayanum gets moving, he's really fast. It's not just, this bruising nature with him. And obviously Mayan's, unfortunately hurt, but he's a lot of the same way. So I think it's probably a bit underappreciated as a team, how fast Ohio State can play. And I would imagine that no matter who they're playing, but certainly against Michigan, trying to put themselves in positions where they can utilize that speed is going to be important.
It'll be really important. And what's going to have to happen is they're going to, and we'll obviously get into this, later weeks, but you just have to dictate tempo. Like when you've seen Ohio State be very successful throughout this whole season, they're in charge, right? They're not responding to the other team. They're controlling the tempo. They're controlling the pace. So what that means is, hey, if they're running it well, you're forcing the defense to respond to that, add a guy to the box, and then you can throw it off of that. That's why I've continued to say that this offense for the last number of years has been built through the run game. And then that just creates such mismatches on the outside. And then those mismatches which were already there are now just certainly exploited because now you got Marvin on one-on-one on somebody where it's impossible. You could put Sauce Gardner out there and he couldn't cover him. It's like he's that type of talent. So it's like you build it through the run game, get some success there, and then you're able to open the rest of the offense up. It's been very good to see it kind of grow to that point so far.
All right, we're going to wrap on a Michigan topic here, even though we weren't planning on it, because I'm seeing a lot of that in the comments. I wrote something last week that was pretty pointed. Caught a lot of flack for Michigan fans for that.
Did you? I didn't see any.
Don't care. Don't care. I want to ask you your opinion.
Yeah.
given what we've learned along the way here, and maybe I should spell out some of this just to set this up better. Connor Stalions is gone. First, it sounded like he was fired. Then the university came out and said he resigned. Michigan has essentially acknowledged the fact that there was enough evidence there that he cheated, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've got the paper trail is available. They've seen enough of this to know that what he did was illegal, and so he's not part of the program anymore. I don't know what in the world is taking the NCAA so long to make some kind of public statement on it, but he was on the sideline at Central Michigan, and there's really no denying it at this point. That was Connor Stalions wearing a Central Michigan hat and a Central Michigan pullover and sunglasses on the CMU sideline against Michigan State. Nobody has said that with the definitive proof that we're waiting for, but it was him. And I think everybody knows it was him at this point. I don't think that's a leap of faith. Michigan seems like they are trying to hang on the whole due process thing here and say that, well, if it's a rushed investigation, we're going to, we're going to take legal action if Jim Harbaugh is suspended by the Big Ten, because the Big Ten sportsmanship policy does not have the same stipulations that the NCAA bylaws do that say that a head coach is responsible for everything that happens in his program. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of legal stuff going on here. And in my opinion, part of why we haven't learned anything yet as of 9:00 on Monday, the 6th of November, has everything to do with the fact that the Big Ten and the NCAA are trying to make sure that whatever they decide they're going to do results in as little legal action as possible. They're trying to limit their exposure before they do something. That's my opinion. So, assuming that that is all true, and I don't think that's a great leap of faith, because there's a lot of other stuff that's going on social media that is not verifiable. And by the way, I should say one other thing. Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports today reported that the NCAA has no evidence at all linking Ryan Day and his family to an investigation as a PI into Michigan's sphere. So if the NCAA has not found any link there, even though every Michigan fan board seems to say that that's a thing, given everything else that I've said, what do you feel like would be a acceptable punishment for Michigan?
Yeah, great question. No, it's a heck of a conversation, and it's like where I kind of fall on it is a little bit not quite to the edge you are on. It's like, in my thought, I kind of split it up into two ways of looking at it. Like from did they break the rules? If all this is true, did they break the rules? Yes, it's against the rules to record and to scout signals and whatnot. From a football perspective, I think it's like a very small problem. Like every team, like from high school to the pros, like if you're signaling your plays in, you're at risk of them getting stolen. However, what I said first, the rules are the rules and you broke the rules. So therefore, whatever the punishment does come down to be, if it's proven true, I think it's fair. The problem is exactly what you said. It's going to get drawn out, and Michigan's going to drag this out as long as possible. Like, it takes forever for these things to go. I know people are calling for Harbaugh to be fired. I think it's kind of like part of his plan. It almost feels like he's going to do the Pete Carroll scorched earth and I'm going to the NFL thing. It's a sticky situation, man, because it's like the court of public opinion has already proven Michigan guilty. And you don't know really how it's going to, in the end, shake out. My guess is it's not going to be good for Michigan. And my guess is that, it's going to end in Harbaugh, this being the final year of Harbaugh. And kind of almost like feels like according to plan, almost like he was going to leave anyway type of a deal. I don't know, man. It's a sticky deal. It's a sticky deal.
I mean, I sort of anticipate that Michigan is probably going to try to file a temporary restraining order if there's any suspension or penalty levied against them. And TROs can be quickly ruled upon and are often ruled upon without all parties at a hearing. So assuming that Michigan is building its legal defense because they received, a notice of allegations from the Big Ten officially now, we've learned. And when I say we, by the way, I mean like what's been established and reported by Pete Thamel, by Ross Dellinger, by the AP. I would anticipate that Michigan is going to try to fight this tooth and nail. Mm-hmm. And what bothers me the most is the fact that whatever penalty is ultimately levied against Michigan, it's feeling more and more likely that it won't affect this year's team. And I just think that's flat out wrong. Yeah. Because you're going to punish student athletes inadvertently, but you're going to punish the coaching staff of a program that, it might not even be the same staff next year. You're going to hurt people that weren't a part of this. Mm-hmm. Does it hurt their image? Will it hurt their recruiting? Probably. We're talking about probably the biggest scandal in the history of college football. And I know there were some other scandals. I've seen and read everything everybody's said. This was directly impactful on the integrity of the game. It had nothing to do with like the stuff that goes on around your program. This is like in the 60 minutes of the war. And even if you don't like the rules, even if you think they're archaic and that, those were created at a time where, it was a rule put in place so that schools that didn't have the same budgets, could be on the same playing field. Like, if you don't think the rule is fair, too bad. Like, change the rule then, but don't break the rule that everybody else is supposed to be playing under. And, you alluded to it, like sign stealing's not illegal. And if you steal somebody's signs during the game, good for you, man. Like it's kind of like, it's the game within the game. Like that's fine. But the rules are black and white. You cannot send someone in person to advance scout an opponent, and you cannot use a recording device to record someone's signals, period. That anything else that like tries to deflect away from that is just a distraction. They cheated, period. It's not an allegation. There is video evidence. Right? Purdue's coaching staff comes out this week as their radio host like dances around the topic, and he's like, yeah, the thing is, it's not even an allegation. Like, I've seen the video. We can prove it. The guy in the seats that they sold tickets to and transferred was taking video of our sidelines the whole game. Like, we have it on film. There are pictures and videos to prove all of this. So there's a part of me that's kind of like, does the NCAA or the Big Ten, like, are they not on the internet? Do they not look at, or do they not use what seems to be readily available from everybody else?
Well, that's the thing too.
I don't want to keep cutting you off.
You're good. No, I have
a problem. I have a problem with Michigan being allowed to continue to play this year. I do. Does that seem too harsh? I don't care. I don't care. They violated the integrity of the game. I don't think they should be allowed to play again. I don't think that's going to happen. Let me be very clear about that. I don't think that they are going to, be essentially told you're done for the season. But I don't think it's okay that they play. And I thought the fastest post-game handshake of all time at the end of the Michigan-Purdue game, I thought it was too slow. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was watching the clip. I saw the clip on Twitter, and I was like, I didn't even see Purdue's coach. I didn't even see him. Like, it was like, holy cow. Yeah, it's crazy. It is. And just like you said, the conversation can end right after. Did you break the rules? Is there recording evidence? Like, nothing, all the other information is just not meaningless, because it's like, all right, boom, boom, there you go. And go from there. It's
and you know what? If I'm like, I appreciate that Michigan's president, Santa Ono, is trying to stick up for his team, right? He is trying to have his guys back. I think that's admirable. If privately, if I'm on the board of regents, like, what do we got to do to get rid of this guy? Goodbye. Like, it's embarrassing, man. I don't understand how it could be okay for a university to continue to back Jim Harbaugh after he lied to the NCAA on a really minor level. He shouldn't have had recruits on campus during a dead period. You're not allowed to do that. And he lied about it. So you have like no good graces left. You've burned that ability for people to give you the benefit of the doubt. And, to your point on like the whole Pete Carroll, I'm just going to, say sayonara to
burn everything and see it.
Like, if I'm an NFL franchise, and I realize it's different, but like, why would I want somebody like that has that reputation involved with my team? I hope the NFL, if Harbaugh is done eventually, however this plays out, if he doesn't coach at Michigan next year and he latches on with an NFL team, I hope the NFL levies whatever punishment that the NCAA levies. And I hope they send the message that, hey, you know what? We're not going to just be some scapegoat for somebody who broke the rules somewhere else. I don't know for sure that that'll happen. I know it happened to Jim Tressel when he, joined the advisory staff for the Indianapolis Colts after he left Ohio State. I know he was suspended for what was it, 6 games maybe?
Yeah.
So I don't know. But the idea of getting off scot-free is not okay with me. And I'll wrap up this whole thought by just saying it this way. It's very clear. It's one of two things. It can't possibly be something different. Either Harbaugh knew or he didn't know. You either know or you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
If he knew, he's a cheater. He cheated. If he knew and he let it happen, he's guilty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Period, point blank. If he didn't know, what an incredible condemnation of his ability to lead a program, to not know what's going on underneath his own nose.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's worse, right? And again, like, as somebody who either runs a university or runs an NFL franchise, why would I want somebody like that associated with my team or my school? That's I don't know.
You make some great points there. I mean, it's tough to argue any of that. I mean, it's like, hey, you got to either know what's going on or you do know what's going on, and you were not only knew about it, but you were encouraging it or letting it happen, and then using it to your advantage. It's crazy, man. It's a wild story, and we'll see. It's going to shake out quickly. It's going to happen a lot quicker than I anticipated. I thought it was going to get kind of drawn out even a little bit longer than even you and I even discussed. But it seems though it's like steam's starting to pick up, and there's going to be something that happens here pretty darn quick.
So, I mean, I've seen on social media from a couple of national reporters that there's going to be some, I don't know if conclusion is the right word for this, but there's going to be some announcement of some punishment levied this week, maybe as soon as Wednesday. The Big Ten is required to give any school that they send a notice of allegations to a reasonable amount of time to respond to that. And I am under the impression that Michigan has a few days since receiving that notice from the commissioner. So I would expect that Michigan will probably hear something this week. And like I said, I would anticipate that their legal defense is probably ready to go, right? We're not talking about the NCAA and the Big Ten and Michigan having like ambulance chasing lawyers that don't know what they're talking about. Like there are going to be a lot of billable hours that come out of all of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I would anticipate that the moment Michigan hears something they don't like, that they're going to try to go get a TRO injunction and see what happens. So it will certainly be interesting to follow. But I don't know. I am irritated by the idea that they will be allowed to continue to play this year. And I hope that at a bare minimum, I hope that Michigan is not allowed to compete in the Big Ten championship game, even if they are allowed to play the rest of the regular season. And I hope that Jim Harbaugh is levied a suspension because and a meaningful one, because if he isn't, and if they aren't, there is no reason for any other program other than to stand by their own moral compass not to do the same thing that Michigan has allegedly done.
Yeah.
There needs to be a strong message sent that what happened was not okay.
Yeah, you make a great point with that last one too. It's like what'll stop anybody else from doing it in the future if this isn't handled properly. Yeah, we're going to see here soon, hopefully.
Yep. So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, look, I realize that is the predominant conversation right now among Ohio State fans, and I don't want to ignore what's going on with Michigan, but I also don't want it to completely dominate conversation around Ohio State football, and I don't want it to be the overarching content on our channel or in our coverage with Buckeyes Now, because this team is worth covering, and these guys are elite college athletes. They're 9-0. They're the number one team in the country. They look a little different than they have in years past. They played some damn good football. And the reality is, here we are in the beginning of November, and they have a chance to win a national championship. You know, their goals are very realistic and right in front of them. And I think this team deserves to be covered for what they've done. And I don't want to feed too much of the distraction and the rumors on our video coverage, especially here with what's going on with Michigan. So we'll address stuff as it comes up if it's necessary. Certainly when there are rulings and things, we'll acknowledge those. But I want to keep most of our coverage focused on this group because that's what they're trying to do too. And I think we owe those, look, we don't work for the school, right? We're an independent publication, an independent organization. But I feel a responsibility and an obligation because I've been around a lot of student athletes for a long time. I think student athletes that work as hard as major college athletes do deserve the time and attention to celebrate what they're doing. And in some cases to be critical if they're not playing well. So, let's continue to provide coverage that people want to pay attention to and not just feed the narrative. So that's what you're going to get from us here at Buckeyes Now. How's that?
I love it. That sounds like a plan to me, my friend.
Good. We got some film breakdown coming your way tomorrow as we continue to wrap up Rutgers week and get ready for Michigan State week coming up at the Shoe on Saturday. By the way, the last piece of news from Ohio State today that was especially notable, the Minnesota game a week from Saturday, kickoff for that game has basically been guaranteed to be an afternoon game, but it's not official whether it's a noon kick or if it's the mid-afternoon, 3:30 or 4 o'clock window. Ohio State has to be on Big Ten Network at some point this year, and the way things have shaken out, it's that game, and it'll be an afternoon game. So we know that game's on BTN, but we don't know if it's noon or if it's either the 3:30 or 4 o'clock game. That will be announced actually a week from today, 6 days in advance. So that's the latest news on that. For all the other latest news and information around the Buckeyes, head to BuckeyesNow.com. We would certainly appreciate your support there. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing to this YouTube channel so that we can continue to have conversations with you just like this, we'd certainly appreciate that as well. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. Thanks for hanging out on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. We'll see you tomorrow with a film breakdown after Ohio State's win over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.